Good afternoon, collectors and friends. Welcome back to Leighton's Loft. How are you today, Lou?
I'm doing very well, doing well. Interesting. I was telling J5, I hit the door for my coat this morning, trying to decide which one to wear. Checked my phone, it was 71 degrees. They said, no coat today.
Lou, I had a tennis lesson and it was outside. And I said to the guy, because he kept saying, he's like, this is incredible weather. I'm like, at the end I said, obviously I pay for the lesson. I'm like, you have an extra half hour? He's like, yeah. I'm like, I didn't eat lunch yet, but I'm a little hungry. But, like, when are we going to have this kind of weather again in November?
I know, right? It's just gorgeous. Like I said, yay, climate change.
I mean, listen, I understand that in a certain amount of time in the future that today may be considered bad based on this 70 or 80 degree weather in the Northeast. But to be clear, I'm going to try to enjoy today for what it is.
That's right. Exactly right. Yep. You got a November day that's just beautiful.
Yeah. Welcome to Bender and Ken, Cassie, Preston, Nikayla, Chris. Appreciate each and every one of you tuning in today. Thank you so much. I was not on last month as J5 handled the show, so it's nice to be back in the saddle. Got a bunch of things to cover. It's funny, Lou, I was considering this morning that a really fun topic yesterday, to be clear, would have been if we had the show. Not to get political, but the way to intertwine politics and baseball cards would have been to simply ask, who would be better for the hobby? Now, seeing as how we're 24 hours later, probably not as relevant, seeing as how it looks like Trump is taking office. But it would have been an interesting thing to discuss yesterday.
Which one of the presidential candidates would have been better for the hobby?
Yeah.
Interesting question. Very interesting question.
Yeah, and obviously it's still interesting today. It's just not as, fun to discuss, seeing as how we know is going to the office.
Yeah, well, let me ask it this way, though, and try to be non-political about it. We know the differences in the economy from the previous Trump administration and the current administration, the Biden administration. Has the hobby economy followed that, or has it continued to grow over the last 8 years?
Sure. It's a really great point, Lou. So, I'm certainly not an economist. I don't spend a lot of time, focusing on it, but I would say that COVID and then all of the money that the government gave out was something that we hadn't seen, meaning both the actual act of COVID, right? And then all the all that money that was given out.
Right.
I think a lot of that, I wouldn't say it ended up only in the hobby. I think it ended up in other places, causing inflation, so on and so forth. And so, I mean, it's hard to say just because that took place during one of the president's, tenures.
Right.
And that doesn't take place, even though there's a lot of things that are chaotic that take place every 4 years, it's hard to say that there's going to be another definitive COVID-related incident.
Well, yeah, and you are right on emphasizing what was really important about the economy at that point with COVID was the influx of money that came in, which helped fuel inflation in general, but gave everybody a lot more disposable income. I mean, a lot of people were sitting here at the end of COVID thinking, I'm doing pretty well right now. I'm not spending any money, and I got more money coming in.
Yes, and it's interesting, Lou, not to kind of like backtrack and walk our way through COVID again, but you're speaking of the money. Our lives changed for a long time afterwards, meaning I can't speak for you, but for me, like I went out to eat a lot.
Yep.
Well, that subsided during COVID. So that money literally was just accumulating, which is a good thing, of course.
Right.
But I think that was accumulating for a lot of people. So it wasn't just the money from the government. You no longer had to commute to work. You no longer had to, buy lunch out when you were at work. You were able to eat at home. So I think that there were ways to curtail your spending. You weren't spending money on gas.
Right.
So I just think it was a different time and place. I'm not the best person to answer it. I don't know what's going to happen, of course, moving forward. But at least yesterday I was talking with a buddy and, he follows some of our podcasts. He was like, I'd love to see you debate it. I'm like, gosh darn it, I don't have a podcast today. But it would have been a fun thing to debate and certainly makes for an interesting discussion.
So do you think the industry, your feel of the industry, did the economics of the industry kind of follow that trend where it dipped down during COVID and then saw an increase with all the money that was around that was available in the economy? And then, of course, inflation hit and just dragged everything down again. So did it react? Did the economy of the hobby react as the economy did?
I believe it acted similarly, not exactly. And keep in mind, Lou, because I remember during COVID how very nervous we were for both Just Collect and Vintage Breaks. Like, why would people need baseball cards?
Right.
And specifically, I remember being astonished that, we became more of a part of people's lives with COVID as far as Vintage Breaks went, because people were really coveting entertainment and connection.
Yeah.
And, connection, of course, was really lacking because people weren't meeting in person. So
and
all of a sudden,
your business and my business kind of thrived because people were doing a lot of what we're doing now. And that was the way a lot of people connected with each other.
Exactly. So it's tough to say what the future is going to hold, but that's certainly, even though it was very scary at first, it quickly, evolved into like, wow, the hobby is on fire. And so, certainly I hope that the world doesn't get into a place like that again. Right. And that our leadership will lead us into a calmer, cooler, and more collectively a society that can afford eggs, that has inflation tamed. But, listen, I have no idea.
Yeah. Well, inflation will tame, and it already has tamed to an extent, but prices aren't going back, unfortunately.
Agreed. And I just think that, in many cases, we have to get smarter, both with our collecting, with our egg eating habits, so on and so forth.
Oh, we'll see. We'll see what the next 4 years brings, or the next 2 or 3 years brings. It's interesting.
Absolutely. Well, we know Trump can't get back in again. It's his second term. Yeah. Plus, he'll be very old.
I was having this conversation on the show before you, this exact conversation, and the guy said to me, "Yeah, but Biden can run again." I goes, "Oh yeah, he can." He'll be very old.
Let's see if Biden makes it.
Yeah, exactly.
And I'm certainly not trying to, wish him any ill will. What's up, Jeff? So lots of other things to cover. No particular order. One thing I wanted to comment on, kudos to both Golden Auctions as well as, I don't know if it was just that individual or if people collectively, because of the lawsuits, if there were a few people that had a claim to the Ohtani ball. But I would tell you that what they did, they meaning whoever caught that ball and selling it quickly, textbook is exactly what you should do when you get an item like that.
Yeah, exactly.
Like that being, to be clear, I think Ohtani's amazing.
Yep.
Lou, maybe controversial or not, even though I find it very impressive that he did 50-50, he's not going to be the only one to ever do it.
Nope.
I have no doubt. And also, Lou, I feel like you're so much more involved in the game of baseball than I am, but we're both big fans, and we know that some of these changes to the rules over the last couple of years have given people like Ohtani a little bit of an easier time, for example, to steal a base.
Yep. Yeah. First, there was an easier time to steal a base. Secondly, it became part of the game again. Not the same as it was in the Brock era, for example, but teams just didn't run because it didn't analytically make sense. But now it makes sense. So it's going to be part of the game again.
Yeah. So my point is, I think everyone did what they were supposed to. Yep. In other words, whoever caught the ball, whether it be one person or these few people, they sold it quickly. Because if you had lost the fanfare or waited till the spring, or the lawsuit would have caused it to delay the auction and have to restart, go another time, I just think that if I ever was fortunate to catch something like that at a sporting event, that the time to sell is now.
By the way, who's to say he doesn't do 50-50 next year, by the way, and just cut into the price of that ball unbelievably?
Well, what's really interesting is you stole my thunder. So I think someone else might do 50-50 at some point. I think there's a legit shot at Ohtani doing it again. Yep. And if he does it again, what is that ball worth?
Nothing.
Just less, not nothing.
Very little. Yeah.
Yeah.
No, you have all the hype. Baseball was so tuned on Ohtani at that point because the races were decided to a large extent. It was late in the season, and the game everything was tuned to Ohtani because he was incredible. Take advantage of the hype. You have all that media behind you. Sell the ball, for crying out loud. Sell it immediately.
Oh, 100%. So I think they did a great job of that. And, listen, I think it's good for the hobby. I think something like that selling for $4 million, I just inherently think more people will have eyeballs on our hobby because of that.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think it's a win-win for everybody.
Yep. And it doesn't have to be something that you found in your grandfather's basement to
Exactly.
draw that kind of money. Yeah.
Exactly. So speaking of baseball, I see Chris Brown with a comment about Soto. You think Soto's going to the Red Sox?
No chance in hell.
Yeah, I didn't think so either. Yeah.
Man,
I think he's going to the Yankees or the Dodgers.
That would make sense. Oh, God, if the Dodgers spent for him. Wow.
You know, I almost feel, and certainly I know it's going to happen, but I almost feel if the Dodgers get him, there's going to be some sort of like revolt.
Oh, there will.
As far as the other fans, teams, owners. I mean, at some point, right, it's a little bit gross. Right? I mean, that's...
I'm just laughing because it sounds funny coming from a Yankees fan. That's all.
Totally agree. But nonetheless, speaking of baseball, so let's talk the Yankees and Dodgers for a minute, Lou. And I know you're very in tune to the game.
Yep.
In your humble opinion, of the two, I have a feeling I know you're going to say, who is the more likely of the two teams to return to the series next year?
Oh, the Dodgers.
100%.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So now with that in mind, and seeing as how you think the Yankees may not return, who's your pick next year? If you go Dodgers in the National League, who are you picking to come out of the American League?
I will caveat my thought that the Dodgers are most likely to come back with the fact that it's much more competitive in the National League than the American League.
Okay. Yes, you're right. At the top.
At the top. So that would be the one thing. Plus, injuries can happen, as we saw with the Dodgers this year, but their starting staff is going to be back, and they're just going to be better. The Yankees are probably the odds-on favorite because that lineup is just so good. And who's really to challenge them? I mean, Baltimore's going to lose Corbin Burns, right?
Yes.
Chances are. So what are they going to do with their pitching staff? And they're not just losing Corbin Burns means they're not going to be as good this year as they were last year. So who's a legitimate threat in the American League? The Yankees have a great chance of repeating and getting back, I think. So far from what I've seen, free agency is one more thing. We'll take a look at that. But really, who's going to push the Yankees at this point?
I mean, we'll see if Cleveland can get back to it. Out west, there's obviously a lot of issues. It'd be nice to see the Mariners put together a good ball club. Yep. The Angels are kind of cooked. I agree with you, but I got to tell you, Lou, I don't watch the Yankees as close as, for example, my friend Monty does or some of my other buddies. But I think that if Soto doesn't come back, the Yankees are going to have a substantially difficult time to get back there. I just don't think they're the same team.
Yeah, but the thing is, and the thing about them this year is they were the best team and they got there, but the playoff system the way it is right now is a bit of a grind and a bit of a crapshoot. And I was surprised they survived because they seemed a team that was really vulnerable to that short series type of mentality. So kudos for them for surviving. And it showed up against the Dodgers in a 7-game series, but in the shorter series, I thought the Yankees were going to have trouble. So I give them credit for making it there. And it doesn't mean the best team in the league always makes it. As we've seen in baseball over the last 5 or 6 years, the best team doesn't always end up on top.
No, in fact, I'm curious how you feel about this, Lou. But I feel like maybe in other sports, like, for example, to be the wild card in football, just playing an extra game is just so hard in football,
yep.
right?
Yeah.
But in baseball, remember Arizona, the Diamondbacks from a few years ago, if you can get momentum, and even though you don't want to play in like that 1-game playoff, right? But if you somehow get there and you win that 1-game playoff, I mean, you just have such incredible momentum.
Well, and we know pitching is everything, and you get into a short series and you have 1 or 2 good starters and you can get through that short series. That's a real crapshoot, even for a good team getting through that short series, because depends on hopefully if you're like the Dodgers, you get your starters lined up for that short series and you're good to go. But it doesn't always work that way either. Look at the Braves. The last day of the season, they needed a game to win. Chris Sale went down. They lost Chris Sale for that series. That was a really good team. And with Chris Sale pitching the way he pitched all year, they would have been quite a challenge for the Dodgers and quite a challenge to run deep. But they lost their best starter like a day before the series. So that's
no, listen, I agree with you. I do think that the baseball playoffs, I remember a couple of years ago, I was a little like, hey, I don't know about all these changes. I love it. I love the baseball playoffs.
I love everything baseball's done in the last few years. I love all the rule changes, the pitch clock, the bases, the shift. I'd go a little further on the shift, actually.
So
I like the short series. I like everything Major League Baseball has done. It is a terrific game to watch, and I like the shorter games, of course. I would have liked the 7-inning doubleheaders, all that stuff. It's fascinating. It's exciting. The game is really good. The World Series was really good. That was fun to watch those two teams play.
I mean, obviously I'm a little biased. I wasn't happy with the result. I just saw Jeff Spellman's comment. Interesting take. I don't agree. But Jeff says the MLB should get back down to 26 teams and go back to just an LCS and a World Series. And we were just talking about how we both love, the playoff structure.
Okay, you guys have a different perspective on the whole Red Sox-Yankees thing. But a few years ago when they had that single game playoff when the Yankees were in, with the Yankees and Red Sox, that was as an electric night at Fenway Park as I can ever remember. That was something special.
Totally.
Really, that game was. And just the suspense of that and having that played. At short series, I understand that people want to see the better teams advance and they don't want them falling victim to what the Braves did with Chris Sale getting hurt or something like that. I understand that sentiment, but it's exciting as hell. It's just, look at what the Tigers, look at the run they took this year and how fun they were to watch.
They were.
Yeah.
Yeah, they were.
And I love the Ghost Runner too, Jeff. Sorry.
Interesting. Yeah, I'm indifferent about that. I know why they do it. It's probably the one thing I'm not as sure about.
Yeah, but it's just like in the middle of July, a game going 16 innings and playing till 2 a.m. No, thank you.
Totally agreed. And that's a great response to it as to why they do it.
And here's the thing about it is they went to home runs. The game went to home runs for a long period of time, right? And a home run is tremendously exciting, but there's no anticipation of it. You get the pitch, the home run's hit, everyone cheers and goes down, and then they settle all down again. You have the Ghost Runner from pitch 1 in extra innings. You've got anticipation. Everyone's on the edge of the seat. Yeah.
Of course. Yeah. Of course. Very well put, Lou. So only because we're on the subject of baseball and we have a few minutes, I don't have the list in front of me, but did baseball just come out with like they're doing another Veterans Committee vote or something?
Oh, I don't know. I didn't know that. That would be great.
I thought I saw Steve Garvey on that list, but did I misread this?
I hope so, because the writers stink.
Well,
they got to do something else. The whole using the writers to vote Hall of Famers in isn't working. It just isn't working.
It doesn't make any sense.
Nope. No.
Agreed. So we'll kind of skip over that. I want to give everyone a quick update about my Arizona trips because we just do this Leighton's Loft once a month. And for those of you that don't watch Trading
Chris says they are, by the way, doing another Veterans Committee.
Yeah, I thought I saw it in my one of my feeds on IG, or I'm not sure where.
Bonds, Clemens, McGuire, put those people in. Jesus, what are we doing?
Yeah, it's interesting.
Yeah.
So I wanted to give an update. I went out to Arizona a few weeks ago to take a look at a big collection. And as I think I was telling some folks, I'm not sure if I shared it on Leighton's Loft or not. This was an unusual situation for me because normally when I travel, Lou, I'm going to look at a collection that I'm hoping to buy. Mm-hmm. Now, of course, I was hoping to buy it, but the gentleman was very clear with me. He said, hey, it was a very big collection in terms of what it was worth. He explained to me that, he'd like me to appraise it. He'd like me to make an offer, but he didn't know if he was going to sell it. And that's part of the reason why I didn't actually go out so quickly, because normally I don't travel, certainly to, across the country for things like that.
Right.
But I did go and spent about 11 or 12 hours over the course of a couple of days appraising everything and, letting him know what I would pay for it. It turns out that we didn't reach a deal, but we didn't reach a deal. This person used to be in the finance field. So, he's very well aware of the tax laws. So he's an older gentleman. He's going to start gifting the cards to his son.
Oh, interesting.
So that he does it according to what he can do tax-free. So now that he has a document as to what his cards are worth. So anyway, it was a little bit candidly uncomfortable for me because not only did, of course, I want to buy them, but, I didn't leave there with the cards and I didn't leave there with a check, meaning for my services. And, he gave me every bit of confidence that he would, pay me.
Right.
But nonetheless, it was uncomfortable for me. And a buddy of mine, not in really the hobby, although he's going to be, he does collect, and I'm going to have him as an upcoming guest on Trading Card Therapy. His name is Patrick. I remember talking to Patrick before I went out there, Lou, and I said, I don't normally do these kinds of things. And he said, Leighton, because he's an entrepreneur himself. He's a mural artist, very talented.
Yep.
He said, Leighton, if you always go through the door that you're supposed to go through, you know what's going to be on the other side of the door.
Yep.
But yet, if you open a different door, you're right. You may not like what's on the other side. But what if you love it?
Right.
What if it's super duper exciting? And so the reason why I'm bringing it up is because I went down a different road, a different door, and the gentleman just paid, I just got the check. So I got paid for my services, which was nice because it covered my entire trip to Arizona, and I stayed at a nice place. I was able to go to a local card convention and spend several $1,000s on cards.
Nice.
I set up a little, what I would call an impromptu, like appraisal fair, situation for a day, for a few hour period at the hotel I was staying at in Arizona. And I was able to spend a few $1,000s with a few people there. I got to play tennis in front of mountains. I went on an epic hike of Camelback. I went on, I think it was Echo Canyon. It was actually quite challenging. And so I wanted to share with you.
Opportunity here.
I'm sorry?
Look at you grabbing opportunity here. That's exactly the way it's done.
So that was what I wanted to share with you, is that it was not like my usual trip. And, I don't have, I bought cards, and I guess I'll post some of them online, but, I didn't walk out of there with, let's say, by the way, in this collection, I'm just going to share a couple highlights because I don't want other people necessarily to figure out who it is per se, because they still might sell. So he has a 1933 Gaudi set, 1952 top set. Ooh. And what was really interesting is I knew the person that was selling him the cards in the 80s and 90s, not the only person, but one of the people. And, of course, a lot of his cards were great. Some of his cards were, trimmed or altered in some way. And that was one of the things that he really enjoyed about what I did during my appraisal, Lou, is that I didn't just give him, like, here's the Excel spreadsheet, here's black and white numbers. Right. See you later, bye. No, I literally gave him a playbook as to what to do with your 1952 top set. If you don't want to sell it to me, you got to grade the mantle. It's going to grade this. You got to grade the Jackie. It's going to grade this. And when he reached back out to my email to let me know the check was on the way, he included a little letter with the check and said, hey, my son's going to reach out to you sooner rather than later, because he understood what I was saying. Even if you don't want to sell today, you still want to get the key cards graded. Yep. So that if and when you have to sell, especially quickly, and this is my advice to everyone, if you're sitting on some cards that should be graded, I know for myself, and it's probably kind of like a little bit loony that I do this, sometimes I don't grade cards that I love, because as soon as I grade them, I know they're liquid and they're much more easily sold.
I got you. Yeah. You're kind of hemming yourself in a little bit.
But it's nice because I like it. It's a way to I get to enjoy the cards just a little bit longer. And I think it's great to do that. But also understand that if you need to sell, for example, a 1933 Gaudi set raw on a moment's notice, you're going to get a much better offer and substantially more money, is my guess, if the Ruths and the Gehrigs and a couple of the other biggies like Jimmy Fox and Dizzy Dean are graded. They don't even have to be graded high, by the way. They could be graded 2 or 3 or 1 or authentic. People just want them to be in a slab so that they know what they're receiving.
Well, you pay for the doubt of what those grades could possibly be.
Absolutely. So, all in all, it was a great trip. And I want to let everyone know that I'm planning something similar to Florida. So I'm not sure exactly where I'm going. It's a combination of, it could be Boca, Tampa, Orlando, Miami. So I'm not exactly sure where I'm going to land. But if you are in the Florida area and you're interested in grabbing a beer, grabbing lunch, talking cards, trading, getting an appraisal, selling, so on and so forth, or if you're a good tennis player, I'd love to see you out there on the court. I'll bring my racket. But that's the trip I'm working on next. As far as, kind of seizing the moment, Lou.
This is what shows the difference with Just Collecting Vintage Breaks and your whole stable over there from what normally goes on in the hobby. You stated it beautifully. You didn't want to do a transactional thing with this guy. You didn't want a spreadsheet. You didn't want numbers, and here's what it is. you had a moment with him. You had a hobby moment. You talked about things and went a little bit further. It was less transactional and a little bit more of the passion of the collecting and the hobby into it. And that's what makes Vintage Breaks and Just Collect so great. It's not a transactional organization. Yeah, everyone's in it to make money, no doubt about it. But it's something different than that. It's got more involved in it than just the transaction of exchanging money for a card or exchanging a card for a card.
Very, very well put, Lou. And I'm going to close with a couple of things here. Number one, speaking of community, I do this every year, especially around, the Thanksgiving time. Do yourselves a favor. If you haven't yet, check out my eBay store. It's under the username just_collect. And for, probably the month of November and a few weeks into December, if you're from our Vintage Breaks or Just Collect community and you see something in the store that you like and you'd like to do a trade for it, let me know. You can email me directly at Leighton, Leighton, at justcollect.com. Of course, you could talk to any of the guys in the Vintage Break stream where we stream 7 days a week on YouTube. You can find us there at youtube.com/vintage breaks. And I want to take a moment to plug our other podcasts. So recently, Trading Card Therapy has been a lot of fun because I've been interviewing someone every week.
Mm-hmm.
And recently, I just interviewed Leon Lucky. What a great name. He is the owner of net54baseball.com, which is an extremely popular message board and, buy, sell, trade board for people who collect vintage sports cards.
Yep.
He was a tremendous guest. That episode alone already has over 1,000 views in about a week. So if you haven't checked it out, do yourself a favor. It really is a fun podcast. You can watch it on YouTube, but if that's not your thing and you like to listen to podcasts, you can also listen to it on Spotify and Apple or wherever you enjoy, your favorite podcasts.
Oh, and Net54 has such a great history. It must have been a great interview.
Yeah, I know he was great. I've known Leon for over 20 years, Lou.
Yeah, we've all known Net54 for over 20 years. Going back a ways.
Yeah. So anyway, that's a scoop with Trading Card Therapy. Also, I recently spun off my Vintage Spotlight segment on Jeremy Lee's Saturday Night Sports Card Live show into its own podcast. We broadcast about a couple times a month. We oftentimes have a collector on. So I would encourage you to check out that podcast as well. You could do that either on Jeremy's YouTube channel, Sports Card Live, or on our Just Collect YouTube channel, or once again, look for the Vintage Spotlight on Apple or Spotify or wherever you enjoy your favorite podcasts. Lou, I don't know if I lost you, but we were just about to wrap up. So I'll give you another second or two, Lou, and if not, we are going to wrap it up for today's show, and hopefully we'll see you in the Vintage Breaks stream later today on youtube.com/Vintage Breaks. Thanks, everybody.